Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Terrence Griffin, and I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement here at Rutgers University, Newark. I want to start off by thanking you all for joining us today and being with us this afternoon. This webinar is part of the Rutgers University Alumni Association's virtual event series, which offers Rutgers alumni and friends an opportunity to stay connected and hear from the faculty across the university. Today, we are honored to have with us the new Dean of the School of Criminal Justice, Dr. Bill McCarthy, who will be joined by Cesar Aguirre, who will moderate tonight's conversation. A little bit about Cesar, and then I'll turn over the floor to him to introduce our Dean. Cesar is a graduate of the Rutgers Newark School of Criminal Justice, having obtained both his bachelor's and master's in 2013 and 14 through the accelerated 5-year program. He further earned a master's in public administration in 2017 at St. Peter's University. Cesar has worked in the nonprofit sector most of his career and is currently an aide to Commissioner Victor Barrera from his hometown of West New York. Cesar currently serves as the Vice President of the Rutgers School of Criminal Justice Alumni Association. It is a pleasure to have him with us tonight. Please note all attendees have been placed on mute for the duration of this discussion. If you have questions during the discussion, please feel free to send those via the Q&A option, which is at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation. And after the discussion with the Dean, we'll do our best to get through as many of those questions as possible. It is now my privilege to turn it over to Cesar.
Thank you, Terrence. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Cesar Aguirre, and please allow me to introduce our featured guest, Dean Bill McCarthy. Bill McCarthy joined Rutgers University in Newark in 2020. His early research is focused on adolescents offending and relationships with parents, fictive families, peers, and romantic partners. In these studies, he and his co-authors develop ideas about criminal capital, co-offending, success, social bonds, and danger. Some of his more recent examines overt discrimination and juvenile crime, while other projects use a labor perspective to examine sex work. His current work focuses on racial segregation, crime, policing, and criminal justice in Chicago. His research has involved a collection of original survey and interview data from homeless adolescents and adults working in the sex industry, as well as analysis of secondary survey data and official data. His awards include the most recent, the 2020 American Society of Criminology Mentor Award, the 2020 University of California Davis Graduate and Postdoctoral Mentorship Award, the 2010 American Society of Criminology Outstanding Paper Award for his work on love, sex, and crime, adolescents, romantic relationships, and offending, and many more. It is now my privilege to welcome Dean Bill McCarthy.
Thank you, Cesar, for that very kind and generous introduction. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I'm excited to participate in the Q&A and to talk with you about the questions you have. I want to thank you for agreeing to moderate this panel, but also extend thanks to Terrence and all the other people who helped put this together, from the Office of Advancement Events and the Alumni Association and development folks. And I also want to acknowledge that an honor that the Rutgers University Newark is located on the ancestral lands of the still living and sovereign, and I may mispronounce this, my apologies, Munsee Lenape peoples, communities, and nation. And that's something that's real important to acknowledge. So in terms of myself, I could tell you a bit about myself, but I think it probably makes more sense to jump into the questions so that we have more time for people who have joined us today to ask questions. Like many other academics, I could talk for a long time about many topics, some of which are really important to me, but might be less important to people who have joined today. So I'd like to jump in and get started.
All right, sounds good to me, Dean. Well, so we'll start with the first question. Can you please tell us a little bit about your professional background and what ultimately brought you into the School of Criminal Justice at Rutgers Newark?
Sure, thank you. So like many of the students who attend Rutgers, I come from a non-traditional background. I was the first person in my family to go to college, and I'm the only person with a college degree. My parents were unable to finish high school. They needed to go to work to support their families. I was very fortunate in that I did not have to do that. I grew up in a small town, in a small city in Canada, where it's the norm to go to school where you live. And so like many Rutgers students who are from the Newark area, I went to a university, a small university in the town that I grew up in. And that was affordable. And I got, like I think the students here, a first-class education. I was very fortunate that school was an affordable thing for me because I was able to live at home and there were lots of part-time jobs. So I worked throughout my degree. I did a second degree and I received a Bachelor of Education. I was always interested in teaching and I thought that's what my career would be. So I completed my education degree and then taught for 2 years in a multi-graded school in the prairies, in the cold part of Canada. But it was a great experience. I taught from grades 3 to grade 11, and I realized that teaching is one of my central loves of my career. I did want to further my education though, and I had only known a couple of people who had gone to grad school, and the way they talked about the grad school experience sounded really exciting to me. And so I applied to the University of Toronto and was lucky enough to get admitted and spent 5 years there doing my doctoral degree and my master's degree in sociology. I was interested in trying to understand the conditions under which individuals would decide to engage in crime. I think that crime is a risky activity, and so trying to understand that decision-making process was central to what I was interested in, but I wasn't interested in terms of how individuals necessarily made those decisions. I was more interested as a sociologist, how individuals who are part of certain groups, that those groups are more likely to make those decisions. So I was interested in the structural conditions, for example, of homelessness. After finishing my degree, I moved to the University of Victoria, where I was in the sociology department there for about 8 years, and then to the University of California for about 20 years, and then to the University of Toronto for a couple of years, and then back to the University of California, and then moved to Rutgers last year. As I said, I was long-winded, so I'll stop quickly. I'll just tell you in terms of coming to Rutgers, this was not how I planned my career. I had chaired the sociology department at the University of California, Davis, because I think service is an important part of what we do. And if you can be a chair, it's an important thing to give back to the school. But when the ad came out for Rutgers, I read up on it, and several people in the school reached out to me, and we talked about what the school is and its goals. And I was captivated by it. I was very excited about many of the things that make Rutgers unique. And so I applied and was excited to get an offer first excited to get an interview and then to get an offer. And I accepted it without hesitation, not knowing that we would have a pandemic to start off the job, but I have no regrets. It's been great. I'll stop there.
All right, thank you so much, Dean McCarthy. Well thought out answer. So you had mentioned throughout your answer that Rutgers Newark came to your attention, and I think you're aware of this as long as our audience is that one of Rutgers Newark's big positive things is that we're a very diverse campus. I think we've been reported on US World News for a couple of years that we're the most diverse campus in the country. So I ask you, with your area of spells as violence, race, and crime, and sex work, how does your experience help increase the diversity at Rutgers Newark?
It's a really good question. I think in terms of many social scientists, particularly sociologists, so much of our training and what we research and what we think about is trying to grapple with, especially in the United States, the history of inequality. Inequality that goes back, centuries, starting, as we recognize in terms of First Nations or Aboriginal peoples, the horrific episode of slavery and the post-slavery South in the United States, and the remnants of that are still with us today in terms of the tremendous disadvantage in communities, First Nations and African American. But other communities have also struggled with acceptance in the United States, and we see a revision of anti-immigrant sentiment in the United States in the last 20 years, which is disconcerting. It harkens back to so many sad parts of history, both in the United States and the country that I'm from, Canada, where immigrants have been demonized and scapegoated for all sorts of problems which have nothing to do with them. And more than that, we ignore the contributions that immigrants have brought to the countries that we live in, and the culture, and so many things. And so I think growing up in Canada, in a small town, didn't give me the formative exposure to lots of things that people who grew up in more multicultural environments did. But going to Toronto as a young person to studying sociology, moving to the United States, growing up although I grew up in a small city, there was a large large immigrant population, mostly from Eastern Europe and Western Europe. All of those things, I think, created a sensitivity to thinking about issues about diversity and equality and inclusion. In terms of the research that I've done, it sort of has cemented how important it is that we think about those. So the research that I've done is sort of have two streams. One stream is thinking about individuals who are placed in positions of structural disadvantage, and whether that's homeless adolescents, adults who are working in the sex industry. Many of those folks are trying to grapple with structural conditions which they have very little control over, and they're responding to the difficulties that those structural conditions have created for them. So that's one stream of research that sort of creates that sensitivity and the need to give voice to the individuals who are in those circumstances. A lot of social science research, and one of the projects I did most recently involved a participatory action component in which you spend time with individuals in a population, helping them figure out what it is they want to learn and what it is they want to research, and then helping them do that research. And we have a nice example of that at Newark in terms of the Newark Public Safety Collaborative, which is a great resource for the communities in Newark, in which they're available they provide data about public safety and help local communities explore the problems and issues that they want to explore. So that's the one part. The second part, I think, is the work that I've done on racial discrimination and segregation. One stream of that research looks at individuals and the consequences they experience because of being discriminated against. And there's a big area of research that looks at the health consequences of discrimination. I have looked at involvement in offending as a response to the stress and strain of discrimination. And then the second is the racial segregation piece, which looks at, and particularly in Chicago, which is one of the hyper-segregated cities in the United States, the consequences of that for individuals in the Black community in terms of limited access to resources, limited support from policing, problems with policing in terms of mistreatment by police officers to the point of torture and death. So all of those things, I think, are part of trying to understand how it is that exclusion works in the United States and continues to operate in the United States and its consequences. That was a long-winded, circuitous answer, so I hope I've touched on some of the things you wanted me to.
No, you definitely did. It kind of goes into my next question. You know, you bring this vast of work of knowledge in both the criminal justice part and also the sociology part. So it kind of go together. And with all the experience you have, I know you became dean last year, so I know you're still new to this. So during this challenging time for all of us, COVID, discuss what is your vision and main goals for your first year, and also on top of that, what are the challenges that you have faced up until now since you became dean of the school?
So there were several things in there, so I'm going to try to parse them out, and you'll help me
very
out
layered,
for
very
the
layered,
parts
yes.
that I forget.
Yeah.
Some of the challenges, of course, have been around COVID, which no one was prepared for, and it's been difficult because people are and I'm guilty of this as well, want to know. We want some certitude about what's going to happen, and this year has been one of tremendous uncertainty, and that uncertainty is going to continue, and so that has made it difficult for us all. And that's from administrators to staff, to faculty, to students, to our family and friends. We're all trying to cope with this uncertainty, and that's been the biggest challenge. What is amazing is how people have risen to the challenge, and all of those groups have come together to make this work. I think, you know, there's been things that we, in hindsight, would change and do differently, but I'm so taken by the resiliency of everyone in terms of every challenge that we faced this year. People have done well, and so moving to a complete online curriculum, moving to having online appointments, to guiding students, to answering student questions, all virtually, has been a tremendous challenge for staff and faculty, but also for students in terms of making it work for them. And yet we've been able to offer a curriculum, help students on their paths, help students complete their degrees and start the next stage where they embark on their careers. We've done things to increase the presence of the school. For example, last week, we had our first Black History Month event where grad students worked tremendously hard to put together a panel to talk about policing and racism in the United States. We've been actively involved in terms of Women's History Month, planning things around that. We are going to have the Senator Ronald Rice lecture, which was canceled last year because of COVID. We're going to have one this year on March 28th. All of those reflect people's ability to cope with the demands of COVID and still do what we want to do in terms of providing an education. I think in terms of what I wanted to do in the first year, I think a lot of it is just learning what works, how things work here, understanding who does what and how they go about doing it. And that's been very exciting, but very challenging. I'm very grateful for the staff who I work with, who are very patient with me when I ask them a question and they walk me through it as if I'm a 6-year-old child. And then a week later, I ask them again and they walk me through it again. And they're very forgiving that I forget things and that I'm suffering from information overload at times. So that's been very useful. And I've learned a lot about what does work here and what the strengths of the school are, and things that I knew a bit about, but I've now have a much deeper knowledge of. And so things, for example, at the very local level, understanding, as I had mentioned, the Newark Public Safety Collaborative and the great things that it does, getting a better handle on what NJ STEP is doing, and a tremendously successful program in terms of providing education for incarcerated folks. And that sort of reflects that very local focus of the program, but also, and I think this makes the school a very unique institution because it has this very local focus, but it has this tremendous international component as well in terms of the research that faculty are doing, their engagement with scholars in other nations. And I've learned a lot about that. And I think that was the first thing that I wanted to do, was just spend time learning. I wanted to also, you want to have some successes, so to focus on some things that were easy to address, in terms of increasing the school's presence virtually, in terms of internet presence, and in terms of the university community by planning events like the Black History Month event, so that the school has a greater presence within the university. I also wanted to establish better connections with alums. And so reaching out to alums to improve their presence in our school website, for example. We've done some work in that way. We've had our revived a newsletter to send out to folks in terms of what has been happening at the school. And we're hoping to do that a couple of times a year moving forward. Planning events like this, and having these as ways of reaching out to the alumni community. I think in terms of priorities, that's one thing that I would like to continue to develop. I think we have a tremendous set of, not sets, that's not the right word, a tremendous group of people in terms of our alums from all three of our programs who offer a tremendous set of skills and knowledge and expertise and understanding and experience that the current students could really benefit from. And so I'd like to hopefully develop avenues for alumni to participate more in the school in terms of workshops, mentoring, planning and attending sessions, and things like that. So those have been some of the things that have been priorities for me, and I'm sure there are others, but I'll stop there.
No, of course, and thank you so much. And I know I mentioned to you earlier today when I spoke that I am a big believer of giving back to the community. You know, whether it's your hometown or went to school, and you know, a big reason why I'm on the alumni board is because I want to give back to the community, at least to Rutgers students in this case. You know, my experience and share my resource and my story to help, you know, like I said, help a network grow together. And, you know, make connections and, you know, and basically, like I said, be mentors to these students, because obviously a lot of these students probably don't have at home, you know, a parent or they live on their own. So they need that guidance. But thank you so much, Seem, for your answer. And that also leads me to the next question. Since you are the dean and you're under part of the leadership, and I'm sure you have to report to the office of the chancellor and the provost, and with COVID going on, we're still not sure what's going to happen with mass gatherings, especially at Rutgers, because I'm sure before COVID, I'm sure you've seen Rutgers on a full day. It's pretty packed. You can't walk anywhere. So how do you foresee the landscape of higher education in general and at Rutgers Newark change as a result?
I'm going to try to answer that, but I want to say one more thing about, because of what you said about mentorship in terms of how important it is. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be here if I didn't have the opportunities that were given to me by mentors in my undergraduate degree, in my graduate school, in my work life. Mentorship is, when it works well, it is such a fundamental part of an education that I think we can easily underestimate how important it is. And so we want to make sure that we're doing the best job we can in terms of providing mentorship for folks. In terms of where public education is going to go, you know, it's interesting, that description you just told me about. I received a note from an alumni maybe 2 nights ago, Lorraine Rosella, who is at the University of one of the universities in Australia. And it was a picture of the students gathering at the start of this semester's first week of school.
Academics, yeah.
And they're all out in public, without masks, and it was very heartening to think that at some point we may get there, but it will take time, and so we just have to be patient. We have to expect that it's not a linear development. Things will move forward, and then we'll have setbacks. But I am optimistic in a number of ways. I think at some point we will return to things that were more common in the past, as you say, large gatherings in public spaces. Mm-hmm. We'll interact more in person with perhaps smaller classes or a more socially distanced environment, but we will have in-person interactions. We'll meet in offices. We'll meet and go for coffee and have lunches together. I believe all of that will happen. But I do think this has fundamentally changed who we are. It's made us more comfortable with a virtual environment. And I think that the school now recognizes that this is a need that we should be thinking about. Can we help fulfill? Can we help provide an online set of resources for students who are not able to come to campus for whatever reasons, geography, life demands, etc. And so I think that will change who we are. I think we will try to make sure that we have an online presence going forward. I think another thing is it's made us all much more aware of how important interactions are with other folks, and that we need to make sure we prioritize those and recognize what they give to us, and whether those interactions remain virtual for a longer period of time than we'd like. It's still important that we recognize that what they give to us, and so to.
You're absolutely, yeah, you're absolutely correct, Dean. And just to touch on a point, like, we all need that human connection, we're humans, whether it's classmates, professors, people we live with, we need that human connection. And like I mentioned to you this morning, like, that especially at a university, a student, besides the academic part being in class, they also need a social aspect of school, whether it's joining clubs, volunteering, mentoring, having a job on campus as part of student life in general, on top of just as important as academics, because that's the whole part of being at the university, at the college level. It's to get the whole experience. And obviously with COVID going on, like you said, it's a possibility they might be hybrid. Well, obviously we don't know, because every day things change with COVID.
One thing that you mentioned, Cesar, about in terms of learning from other students, how central that is to what happens. I taught a course in the fall because I thought, this is going to be a great way to get to know Rutgers students and what their backgrounds are and what their experiences are. And I like teaching. So I see, although often deans don't teach, I can't imagine not teaching. But it was great to see, even in a virtual environment, students learning from each other through the chat, through breakout rooms, through putting together work groups outside of class. So that was very impressive, that even under that restricted condition of a virtual online class, that students were able to figure out ways to support and learn from each other. It was very heartening.
Yeah, it's absolutely correct. Students want to learn, obviously, like me, myself, people want to go back to the offices, to the classrooms, but I said, we'll get there to that point. So to follow up with that question, how do you feel you're able to build a rapport with alumni such as myself, other faculty members, and students? How are you able to manifest this during these times?
You think about it in terms of research. Much of the research I've done involves spending time with people who are in vulnerable populations. And you can't do that research if you can't establish rapport. And I think what I've learned is that it's really important to be genuine. You can't pretend to be somebody you are not. And I think as an administrator, the people I've worked with have figured out pretty quickly, like, I am the person I am. I'm easily excitable, and so they have to watch that. I'm also quite emotional and get very passionate and enthusiastic about topics. And I think, in terms, and the other thing is, especially in terms of when you're talking about staff and faculty and students to some extent, is I come from a shared governance background in which the goal of an administrator is not to dictate what happens in a school, but to create an environment where people can come together and reach some consensus about what is important and how to go about best achieving that. And so I think establishing that right at the start of my deanship and working with the various constituents to make sure that we all participate in a shared governance model helps to establish rapport. At the end of the day, I still have to make decisions as a dean, some of which are difficult and which disappoint people. But the more that people feel that they've been engaged in that process, and have been able to contribute and have listened to, and people understand where they're coming from, their positions, then I think we're in a better space. And so I think those things help to establish rapport. The other thing is creating opportunities for it. So I have, for example, virtual office hours in which they're just drop-in office hours, and anybody is welcome to come in and spend time talking about things. We've tried to increase our presence on the web so that you can easily find social justice folks and criminal justice folks and reach out to us. And so I think that's part also of establishing rapport, and events like this and other types of events where we, involve people from the school in public forums where people can come, they can see us, they can participate, and then follow up. And so the panel last week for Black History Month, we had a number of people who followed up afterwards by sending folks questions, and that was great.
That's wonderful. And like you mentioned, we got to make the best of what we have. And obviously, in this case, Zoom has been a great platform for many of us, not just the university level, regular jobs, wherever we're at. It's a great platform. And I want to take this moment to also thank Terrence at the Alumni Engagement Office, along with Marina, for setting this up on Zoom. It's going well so far. So I want to thank you guys in advance. Obviously, technology is also a good thing, as in this case. So I know you mentioned at the beginning that you're very keen on mentorship and having the alumni, such as myself and people who are on this webinar. How do you think that us, the alumni, not the association, but the alumni in general, can help you fill your vision, help you fill what you want to become a reality at Rutgers Newark?
So I think there's a number. So, and I'm very bad, Cesar, for not thanking you for asking questions and for putting them together. I should have done that right from the start.
No, it's all right.
I should have thanked Terrence and Marina. I just got sidetracked by other thoughts. So thank you for reminding me about that. So I guess there's a number of things that we've touched on. One is sort of trying to get building ways that alums can participate in events in the school, planning those, whether they're things like job fairs, mentoring opportunities, attending talks and participating in things like the Senator Ronald Rice lecture or the Black History Month panel and other panels that we'll do in the future. So those things are important, but also I think feeling that they can both call on the school for when they need something from the school, but can also call on the school to say, listen, I'm here as a resource for you. Many of the alumni are experts in areas that are not that well developed, is not the right word, not that well represented in the school. And so they can contribute in ways to help the school, whether it be from offering courses in terms of being part-time instructors, to volunteering to present doing presentations in the school on areas of expertise that they have that the school lacks. To participation in things like helping us put together newsletters and helping us plan alumni events. At one point we had a stronger alumni presence at some of the the national meetings, like the American Society of Criminology. So those are possibilities, but other types of alumni events at school that other schools do that we could learn from, in terms of bringing alums together who want to interact with each other and want to see where their peers have gone and what they're doing, and to learn from them and interact with them. And we can do those things. It'll take us time, but I think all those are possible.
Absolutely correct. And just for the record, if anyone can hear me, I haven't got a newsletter yet at my house, so I'm still waiting for that newsletter. So hopefully I get it soon.
So it's a virtual newsletter. And
okay, all right.
So it came out in the fall. And if
Okay.
you're not on our email list, then you need to
Shame
go
on
to
me.
the Rutgers homepage and find the newsletter link where it says you can subscribe. And I think when we first did this, we had about 3,000 email addresses. We had to clean them. There were a lot of replications, and some people had dropped out.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have an active email audience out
Right.
there who
There
want
we
to hear.
go. Shame on me, I guess, for not knowing that. But it is what it is. I want an actual mailer. I like more of the physical stuff. But these are new times, and we have to adapt. Dean, I want to thank you for your time. We're still not done. I feel like most of these questions that we put together, is to learn more about you, what your vision is, your goal, and the challenges you faced so far. Because I know you've been on the job for about more or less a year. So I'm going to throw the curveball at you, as they say in baseball. And we spoke about this.
No, I'm from Canada. You can only ask me you can only use hockey metaphors.
Hockey pucks. I don't know any hockey terms. What do you call it? What do you call a shot when the slapstick when the puck hits the floor and you slap it right away? There's a term for that.
There's a slap shot and there's
Slap shot.
Yeah.
There you go. Slap shot. So I know some jargon. I'm a Devils fan, for the record. So in live with President Jonathan Holloway back in the fall, he had an event. Obviously, as we know, he's a new president, the 21st president for Rutgers University. So we're part of a new administration. He was asked a question that I would like to ask you. And I know you had time to think about it. So I want to know. So he was asked, the discord and distrust evident in the current political climate are a testament to our nation's growing diversity, not just race and culture, but of views and perspective. Do you believe Rutgers and other universities have a responsibility to facilitate more civil, more balanced, and ultimately more productive discourse? What are your thoughts, Dean?
Yes, I think that is one of the fundamental things that we do in higher education is we create spaces for people to come together from different backgrounds with different understandings, with different orientations and ideas, and to share those. If we only talk to people who think the exact same way that we do, it dramatically limits our possibility for learning and growth. And I think of how much I learned from my university education in classrooms and, as you pointed out, outside of classrooms in terms of interactions with peers. And that's a developmental process. I think of some of the things that I thought when I was 20, and I'm somewhat shocked that I thought those things at 20. But I'm grateful that I continue to learn and continue to change, and understanding is a continuous process. But I think another part of that is a very healthy respect for differences in opinions and understandings. We can't reject someone simply because they have a different understanding than we do. People have not always had the benefits that we've had that have brought us to where we are. People have different background and experiences that take them in different paths. And I think, sort of to paraphrase people who have written about Voltaire and sort of that understanding that, we want to support each other's right to say things and to think things that we may disagree with. And I think the corollary of that is that that's a requirement for everybody in the conversation. It's not, of course, it's not sufficient that I believe that, but you also have to believe that. And to the extent that we both share that belief, we can disagree a lot. And through that disagreement can come new understandings for both of us. And I think that those are some of the fundamental things that universities do, is create that space for freedom of expression, to push boundaries, to give a space for creative thought that takes us to new places. And to do that, you have to have an environment in which you feel everyone in the room has a basic understanding that this is what we do. We create spaces to support people's ideas and expressions which are different than ours.
Absolutely correct. And as I mentioned to you, and I'm sure all our audience here, the viewers, we can absolutely agree, whether you're left or right, the political spectrum is obviously pretty polarized. You can't argue that whatever side you choose, that's obviously people's prerogative. But like you said, university has that platform to create that change, create, like you said, a social discourse, a social conscious movement to kind of help us, not agree, but at least help able to work together for the greater good.
Right, and to find out the places that we do agree. You know, there
Absolutely
is
correct.
lots of disagreement if you think about the United States right now. There is
Of
lots
course.
of disagreement, but there's also lots of agreement.
Yeah.
And so finding those spaces of agreement and focusing on those and using those as the platform to build rather than focusing only on where we disagree placing all of our energies there. I think that's what we've done a lot of recently, and that's been difficult, and we can hopefully do better.
Absolutely correct.
Focusing on where we agree.
And you mentioned like we're so used to like tearing down, you know, we're used to focus on the negative and on the bad part, but we don't focus on the positive. Obviously, we focus on negative, then we're not going nowhere. It's like we take one step forward and we go back literally 2 steps back. So we're back where we started, basically.
Yeah, and we have to have that critical lens, right,
Yes.
in which we interrogate what is difficult, what is problematic, what is wrong and needs to be changed. And in doing that, we're likely to have disagreements and conflict. But if we only do that, then we miss the places and things that we are doing well at, where there's agreement and that we can build on. We have to do both.
Yeah, absolutely correct, Dean. Dean McCarthy, I want to thank your time for giving me obviously the opportunity to get to know you a little more and the people on this chat. I also want to again thank the Office of Engagement, Terrence and his team, the people who participated, who are watching this currently. Is there anything else, any last minute remarks that you want to tell us, or something that we don't know about you? We know you love hockey, a fact.
So, you know, I think, as you figured out, I really have a passion for teaching,
Yes.
for doing research, but also, you know, part of that is the extent to which I value interacting with folks as part of those jobs. Like, it's to be in the areas of research, or the types of research that I've done have involved spending time with people. And my teaching is very, you know, I use the Socratic method. I spend a lot of time interacting directly with students, working closely with staff. That is a big part of this job, and it's a very rewarding part of it. So I want to emphasize that I'm here for alums to reach out to and talk to and spend time with. And I see it as one of the great benefits of this job is that I get the opportunities to do that.
Thank you, Dean, very much again for this conversation. Hopefully we can do it again, maybe sometime down later this semester or in the fall or in the summer. I know that we're about to reach the Q&A portion. So Terrence, I will leave it with you.
Right, thank you. Thank you both for that great conversation. There's still an opportunity for folks to submit some questions to the Q&A portion, but we do have a few. Several of them you already answered. So great job with that. And the main one that a lot of folks were asking were how you envision engaging alumni in the future. And I'm glad that you were able to speak to that. I'm trying to categorize these so that they flow fairly well. So the first one is more of an academic question for you, Dean. The question is, are the lessons concerning crime prevention activities that urban American police departments, are there lessons concerning crime prevention activities that urban American police departments can learn from urban Canadian police departments?
Oh,
or neighbors up north?
Yes. So I think policing in general is a difficult topic because it varies so much from community to community. Local policing can look very different, even within areas. So Toronto, for example, that had if you're living downtown, you get a very different policing experience than if you're living in a corridor which is really high density. But I think that some of the things that Canadian policing has done, they've done well. Other things they have done not so well. But there is good bodies of evidence that suggest that the more that police officers participate in training in terms of making sure that their interactions with people in various communities are respectful, are focused on the person they're interacting with rather than focusing on their orientation and their needs. limiting the extent to which we harass individuals simply because they are members of groups that are not the ones that we make assumptions about in terms of crime. Canadian police forces have made major mistakes in that area too. Studies of Toronto policing, for example, have shown that their practice of carding, which is giving individuals a card, doesn't look that much different from stop and frisk practices in the United States, which have disproportionately targeted young males and females from minority populations. So I think the research in both countries tells us that policing can be better in terms of those types of things. I think structurally the research that I'm doing and what other folks have done focuses on the conditions in which neighborhoods which create understandings that are shared across individuals who live in those neighborhoods and the people who police those neighborhoods. And that those shared understandings are often very inaccurate in terms of the neighborhoods themselves and the individuals who live in those neighborhoods. So in the same way that we sometimes carry around ideas about neighborhoods as being high crime or bad or troubled, the police also carry those narratives. And often those narratives are completely at odds with the actual conditions of those neighborhoods and especially the people who live in them. And yet, if we use those narratives as ways of thinking about how we should treat people, it directs policing and to certain ways. I think one of the, there was a podcast that I will blank on the name of it that I listened to a little while ago about the notion of serve and protect and saying that that's actually not part of what is required by many police forces in the United States. That serve part is not necessarily what is required. And yet that is, I think, one of the things that Canadian policing would say has been part of how they think about policing, perhaps more, that their job is to serve as well as protect, but they can do better at that too.
Great, thank you. This question is actually for both of you, and it's in terms of alumni activity. So given the fact that the school is made up of alumni from the undergraduate, graduate, and the doctorate program, how do these groups work together? How do you foresee these groups working together as one group of alumni, given the fact that they have different career paths, they engage with the school differently as students? How do you plan for them? How do you plan to engage them?
So I think that there will be things that they come together on, and there will be things that are separate. So, for example, you think about career development, and yes, that's going to be something that, as you say, doctoral students have very different interests than MA students as opposed to undergrads. But doctoral students people who went through the alums who are PhD graduates and alums who are MA graduates, they can participate in those experiences for the current group of undergraduates, as can undergrad alums. So I think all three groups can be engaged in things like career development and career forums for the current group of students. Mentorship is something that all three can participate in, and that to the extent that the three plan those events together and coordinate with each other in terms of mentorship opportunities for and so that would be great. Also, I think in terms of events, there's nothing that in my view that says that events in terms of talks and interactions have to be divided across these alumni groups. That there may be some that are specific to a particular set of alumni, but I can envision all sorts of panels and presentations and forums that would be of interest to alums from all three groups. So I think we can do it. It's just, we have to, it's not as bad as herding cats, but we do have to figure out ways of creating opportunities and structures for people to come together to talk about and plan and bring to fruition the things that we want to do.
And to piggyback off what the dean was saying, I'm part of the current board right now, and during our tenure, we were big on mentorship. We actually had an event October 2019, so over a year already, where we start connecting mentors, people that graduated, whether at the bachelor level, at the master level like myself, or the PhD level, try to pair them up with mentees, current undergrads, who might need that career change or career advice, to advise them where to go, where to seek information, what to seek for internship. So I know that my current board, we're very big on mentoring, the current students, because obviously, these students, they are the future. Just like one day we were in their shoes, and some of us are fortunate enough to have mentors, to kind of show us the way. Some of these students don't have those resources or know where to go. So that's definitely something that's very big for our current board, and we would like to continue that as it progresses, whether it's online or if it's on a virtual platform or some open space. But we definitely want to continue that agenda of mentoring these young students.
And we have to be patient and recognize that this is a long-term process. It's not that something, we'll 6 months from now, we'll have all these events and all this alumni engagement. It'll be so dramatically different. This is a building process, and we have to have a commitment, a long-term commitment to it, and accept that our successes will be small in the beginning. But I think if we're patient and work hard at it, we can grow something that's sustainable.
Great. In terms of recruiting of prospective students, how do you recruit high school students, upperclassmen who may be interested in criminal justice, or current undergraduate students who may be good for the graduate programs? Can you talk a little bit about your recruitment strategies?
So that's a challenge during COVID, and what we've been basically relying on is the web. And so we've been, revising the web page, and so that it showcases the things that we're doing. We've had the Bachelor of Science degree has been what we've offered for the most part, but we do have a BA in Justice Studies, which we've had for a short time, but it's not been rolled out across the student campus for everybody. And so we're rolling out that. And so we have lots of material on the web page about that new BA in Justice Studies. And I use the we here very royally, because it's not me, it's my staff who is more tech savvy than I am. We've increased our presence on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And so when you go to the School of Justice homepage now, at the very bottom of our homepage, you can see our recent Twitter material that we've posted on Twitter. I'm sure it's called something other than material on Twitter. Feed or something. So we're trying to do that, having the newsletter that goes out hopefully to school counselors. We've had some interactions with folks at various junior college, and we're hoping to do more of that, to talk about the two undergraduate degrees we offer, as well as the joint degree that's available for undergrads. We have a new dual degree at the master's level with the School of Social Work. And so that's very exciting. And again, we've been posting material about that, and they've been also posting material. So we've had a number of folks reach out to us about those new degree programs. At some point, we will hopefully get invited to go to schools and to talk about what the school does and what our programs have to offer. So we're hoping that will happen in the future.
Great. I understand this virtual world makes things a bit of a challenge. The last question for you, just want to take a few moments here before we wrap up and talk a little bit about what's coming up for SCJ, School of Criminal Justice, excuse me for using that acronym there, and how alumni can be engaged right away. What's happening in the next few weeks or next few months that alumni should know about?
I'm going to let Cesar answer that first, because he can tell us about what's going on right now.
So as far as that, I know I've been speaking with Terrence and his office that we're currently at elections for the board. Our nominations just ended this past weekend. I believe it's a two process now where the actual election begins. So before we can plan anything, obviously, the elections have to be sought out. And then, here's to knocking on the wood that that I win Bob Seaton election. Like everything else, I can't pick, but for now we're waiting for the results of the election, and then we gotta start planning ahead. Whether I'm on the board or not, whether it's a role of transition to the next board, I want to at least help out, so at least start the foundation of what Dean McCarthy's vision is for the alumni. But as of now, we have to wait for the election part of the results, and then we can plan a little more ahead. So that's where the Alumni Association is at the current moment.
So other things are following up on with Cesar's example here and signing up to make sure you get our newsletters.
Yes.
And keep staying in touch with us, attending the events that we planned. As we said, we have the Senator Ronald Rice lecture coming up in March. We do, if you're able to, we have 2 campaigns that are happening. We've been very good in terms of the school, in terms of generating resources through the Giving Day campaign. We're often the leader in the university in terms of the number of people who donate, and that's great. This year we have a special ask because a former staff member who many of you may remember, Bill Leipold and Joe Bertolino, have set up a Scarlet Promise fund that we'll be focusing on for Giving Day, and that's a fund to help needy undergraduates. The faculty have also come together to set up a fund for raising funds for grad students. As you know, the fiscal emergency that Rutgers under has really limited how much money, resources we have to help graduate students with professional development. And so faculty, and I've started reaching out to former faculty. We've started donating funds to that, to raise money for that. We're getting close to $10,000, and I'm going to do a matching fund campaign in March, which I'll match donations up to $5,000, so that hopefully we can get a nice sizable pot of funds to help graduate students in terms of their professional development. I have office hours on Wednesdays, and I'm hoping that alums will send me an email note and they'll come by and we can chat. As someone who's very new to the school, even though it's 8 months in, I still have had very few interactions with alums and on a one-to-one space, and I'd like to do that.
Dean, you mentioned that you have office hours. Is there a specific link we gotta go on, or Rutgers that we can find it?
No, I have a Zoomed office link. So if you send me an email note saying, please send me your link for office hours, I'll send it to you.
And it's Wednesday. Is there a certain time?
Wednesday from, I'm going to say 2 to 3.
Okay.
But I'm around other times. If that doesn't work for you, send me a note.
All right. Sounds good. Again, I want to thank everyone, all the attendees, the panelists, Terrence again, the office of the Alumni Engagement, office of, I want to thank Marina, Dean McCarthy for giving me this opportunity, along with the Alumni Association. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And, here's for more discussions, hopefully, later on throughout the semester, we can plan more events.
Great. Thank you all very much. It's been a pleasure.
All right, thank you all on behalf of the RUAA. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Thank you, Cesar. Thank you, Dean. We appreciate everyone coming out tonight, and take care.